right, welcome back, everyone, to Faith Infused Leadership. I'm Meredith Banka, your co-host, here with Debbie Heiser, your host, and she's also the founder of Three Vines Consulting. How are you today, Debbie?
I'm fantastic. Good morning, everyone.
Yes, it's an early morning, I'll have to say. Sometimes we do these podcast recordings at different times, and today we are up early, bringing you some energy, bringing you some light at like 7 o'clock in the morning. So super excited, lots of coffee to be here, because today's topic, I think, is a really important one, and I'm so glad that we're going to be talking about the legacy of leadership and what that looks like, how people are leaders in more places than just the workplace. And so, Debbie, what made you think about this topic right now? What's going on for you?
Yeah, well, actually, by the time people hear this, because we are taping this not only early in the morning, but a few weeks before this will be out, my son, my one and only son, who's 27, and I'm super proud of him, he is getting married in about 18 days. So
congratulations.
Thank you. And we're super excited to have a daughter join our family. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting how things like class reunions that happened this year for me too, and weddings and these big life events can start you to reminiscing. And partially because we're pulling pictures and doing these types of things. And so as I've been reminiscing, I've been thinking a lot about, one of the great leaders I've had in my past always talked about leaving a legacy. And for me personally, I've always wanted to leave a legacy based on my faith. And not so much for that legacy to be about me, but to be about making a difference or a change in the world. And so part of that is through this and the podcast, but part of it is really, I think too, as I'm aging, I'm seeing kind of these batons pass, I guess would be the word for it. Mm-hmm. So there's something I think that happens when you turn a half a century old, so I'm aging myself here, that really starts you to think a little bit differently. When I turned 40, I said I'm halfway to 80. And I said that not as oh my gosh, you're getting old, but more of, it really makes you think about decision making a little differently. And some of those things that potentially you got caught up worrying about. Mm-hmm. And I think I spent so much time thinking I was this or thinking I was that and not really living. Mm-hmm. And so part of that legacy for me is just about reminiscing and thinking about, as a leader, what type of legacy are we leaving? And not just in the organizations that we work in, whether it be our own business or another organization, but in our families and our volunteer mm-hmm. roles in the community. And, what are we leaving behind? Are we leaving behind and bringing up this next group of leaders and this next group of good humans, right. In the world? So it's more about that.
Well, and I think, I'm closer to, I'll throw my my age card in the ring too. Like, I'm closer to 50 than I am to 40.
Yeah. Is
what I have been saying lately. And I'm really comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. I'm really comfortable with that. And I've had so many friends say, it's like this midlife crisis. And I'm choosing to say it's an awakening. I fully Absolutely. Believe that all of the experiences that I have had, that you have had up to this point in your life, have prepared you to be in the years where that legacy is solidified. Mm-hmm. And I love that we're thinking of leadership, not just in the workplace, but in our family and in our community. So for you, when you think about leadership outside of the workplace and the legacy that you're hoping to leave, what does that look like?
I think it looks different for each person, but I'm going to talk to my experiences. So at one point in my life, and I've always said I felt like I was in training for something later in life. And I don't mean the profession of training, which I actually was in for many years.
Right.
I was an educator through my education and got a degree in education. And so kids were always the forefront of my mind. I have one child, so I didn't have a lot of children, but I feel like I have about 35 now because being a youth pastor and having that experience with high school and post-high school students. And it's so fun to see them get married and do these things in their life and have these life moments. And so for me, it's about kind of expanding our reach, but also looking at those that I'm going to focus right now on, those that we love, and what are we imparting to them? Is it a good work ethic? Is it being compassionate? Is it having humor and being able to laugh at yourself? Is it seeing the positive in situations, looking at things as a lesson or a blessing, and seeing potentially both of those? Because I don't think it's healthy either to just go positive Pollyanna all the time.
Right.
So it's kind of about those characteristics. What are we teaching those that are coming behind us, and then also how open are we to receiving what somebody potentially older than us is trying to impart on us, which is just as important. I'm a firm believer we each have both the masculine and the feminine side, and the masculine side is the action and the feminine side is the receiving. And I find, particularly in my work with women, that women have a really tough, and I think men do too in a different way, but a really tough time receiving from other people. And so it's really about both of those things. So those people that you love, I look at too. I've been involved in some great nonprofit organizations. In Kansas City, I was part of the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization there, which was outstanding, helped tons of families and kids. And now in Sandpoint, I feel really strongly about a legacy with the local hospital here. We live in a small town, and a lot of times people don't realize how lucky we are to have the facility that we have so close in this small of a town. And so, kind of looking at that and helping to lead in that organization and the foundation that supports the hospital. So I look at that as well as in your community. How are you giving back to your community?
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit more about this concept of receiving, because I think that in my family anyway, there are generations of very strong women. I would say I'm the fourth generation of very strong women in my family. And I noticed that there are components of the legacy that has been left to me that I am carrying forward to my own daughter. But that only works if I'm also able to help her, and if I, as a leader, am able to learn to receive. So tell me a little bit more about how you work with your clients in relationship to that topic.
Yeah, so part of it is getting people to that point, and I have struggled with this too, to that point to understand that when you receive something from someone, that's a gift to them. It's not only a gift to you, but it's a gift to someone else. And I'm going to go back to an experience. Part of this reminiscing has been about my mother, who passed away about 14 years ago of breast cancer. And she and my son had this really unique relationship, really close relationship. And so when I kind of look back, and I'm missing her a little bit more right now during this, my son getting married too, I think about when she was sick, and she was always someone that gave a lot to other people, but struggled receiving from other people. And so watching her go through that experience and seeing the joy in other people as they gave to her and helped provide for her during her illness really changed my viewpoint on being able to receive. And we used to joke, and I'd call her and say, "What's for dinner?" because people always bring food when you're sick. But that she knew that her family was being cared for. So why I go down that route is we in this society look at receiving sometimes as weakness. And in fact, it's a strength, because when you do receive, what happens is the other person has some reason they're giving, and we have this altruistic view that people give to give. Well, they do, but we have some type of feeling that happens. And so, whether it's I'm being generous with my time or my money, because it makes me feel good to be able to do that, that's not the intention of me doing it, but there's some type of reward with that too. Sometimes you're giving to someone because it changes their life and their perspective. That's why I do what I do. So when I meet with clients, part of it is getting them ready to receive. That's been the biggest thing. And realizing that they're worth receiving. Because I'm on this tangent right now, I have to say, where I think we're in a self-worth
a valley.
well, we're really in it. I think our country is in an epidemic of self-worth, because I look at it and I think hurt people hurt other people. And so there's a lot of hurt people out there. And so then they struggle to receive, because a lot of times too, people have been also given things, but there's things attached to that. You know, there's these expectations attached to, well, I'm going to give you this, so now you need to pat me on the back. And so it's really then too about thinking about kind of a two-sided coin, which I tend to do a lot. But when you're giving to other people, what's the intention?
Right.
And also being able to listen to your intuition, that when you're open to receiving, that what you're receiving is a gift.
And I think the concept that comes to me is allowing, you know, allowing yourself to be given to. You know, I think that for a long time, in particular as women, we've been, you know, pushed down this road of being self-sufficient and being able to do it all and being able to do these things. And that's created an inability for us to simply allow someone to give to us or to do something to serve us. Whereas we feel like we only can be on that giving side. So I can see how that really plays into this idea of the legacy, the balance, the yin and the yang of what you're creating, because it's also that balance between I may be one style of leader at work, and I may be a different style of leader at home and a different style of leader in my community based on what I'm receiving from each of those environments. So that's, yeah.
And actually, you know, when you think about it from a servant leadership perspective, servant leaders are servant leaders no matter where they're at. But to your point, you may change your approach. May not be the style, but the approach that you use. And I only bring that up because sometimes people will say, oh, there's this transformational style, there's this servant leadership style, there's, you know, different styles of leadership. But ultimately, it's really about the approach that you take. Where in servant leadership, what really is talked about is these 10 characteristics, and it just tends to be a way of who you are. But you're right, I'm going to approach my child and my husband differently than I may approach a nonprofit organization, and what I give and what I receive back from that organization. And the same goes for my work, as well as within your work. You know, sometimes you're part of some teams that may come together to solve a larger organizational issue. Well, I'm going to receive and give differently there than I am potentially with my team.
Yeah, absolutely. And with this concept of the legacy, how about looking for those clues of what you're, you know, what's being delivered to you to carry on in your own legacy? How are you helping people to see those clues out there?
Oh, I laugh because I don't know if I am really, but that everybody has different clues. And part of, I think, what I've been trying to help people see is that thoughts, images, things that come to you, there's no randomness about it. And I mean, we talk about, oh, random thought, but really some of the most life-changing experiences I've had is when I got out of my head and I was listening to my intuition, and an image came to mind or something happened that I observed that then I looked at and said, wow, that's applicable to what's happening to me. And I took that and learned from that. Watching this documentary called Finding Joseph. And he is the one that came up with the hero story. And it's like this hero cycle.
Yeah.
And he talks about like Greek mythology and some of these myths, like even Arthur and the Round Table. Really, those were stories that were created to share about our own selves and the parts of ourselves. And so when I look at that, it kind of plays into the style piece too, that there are times that I'm going to face certain things. and how I go about that will also leave a legacy, because your actions speak louder than your words.
Mm-hmm.
And your words and your actions should match each other. And so for me, that's a big piece of helping people see the clues, is just
Mm-hmm.
open to any clues that are coming. So if some kind of random thing happens, or somebody offers you, I use my best friend as an example. She's so funny. We'll be walking, just the other day, we were at farmer's market, and this woman's like, oh, hey, I want to give away this bouquet of flowers. Here, Barb, you can have this. And I'm like, how does this happen to you? Like, this happens to her all the time. And I don't know how this always happens to her. And then as I sit and observe it, it's because she's so giving and open that other people want to give back. So it's kind of like this law of attraction
Mm-hmm.
about before. So if I'm wanting to, and now when I say impart some wisdom or provide a legacy, I'm not pounding it. It's about what this whole show is about: living in the present, being who you are authentically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what leaves that legacy, and they'll see those things. So I try to help people be open and just say, take the blinders off.
Right.
And it's important to have goals, and we'll talk about that in a future segment, but you can't be so narrowly focused on those goals that you're not open to seeing how other people are trying to give to you.
Right. And I think it's also the concept of having intention around the legacy that you're creating. To your point of, these aren't a whole bunch of random acts, right? These are things that are coming into your life for specific reasons. And if we aren't clear that the legacy that we are intending, I could see how those clues could really be missed, right? Because once that intention is clear, then it just starts showing up. Back to your point around the law of attraction.
Absolutely. And I kind of go back, I think I've mentioned Theory U before, and there's a book out there called Source. And I picked it up and am rereading it from this class that I'll be teaching next year at Gonzaga. And it's interesting because it talks about making sure you're grounded to source, whatever source that may be for people. For me, that's God. And so when I'm connected to source, those kind of random things don't seem so random anymore. And they connect for me and give me some understanding, and help me kind of see those messages that are out there, because I think there's all sorts of messages that we just miss on a day-to-day basis.
For sure. So you've definitely given all of us some things to think about today when it comes to legacy and the kind of leader that we are and the leadership legacy that we're leaving throughout our lives. If someone wanted to learn a little bit more about the work that you do or how they could carry this forward, what would be, where would they go? What would be the best place for them to learn more?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different places. I highly suggest my website. That's the best place to get kind of an all-inclusive of what's happening in our world. And that's www.3V as in Victor consulting.com. And also I'm on Facebook. I'm on everything except Twitter and Snapchat. I just haven't gone there. So it's either 3V Consulting or 3 Vines Consulting. And I would love to have more conversation. And so anybody watching this video, I highly recommend to sign up for a 30-minute consultation, and let's have some more conversation around this, or engage in some comments on social media. So
awesome. Awesome. Well, for this episode of Faith Infused Leadership, I'm your co-host Meredith Benka with your host Debbie Heiser, signing off. Have an awesome day. We'll see you the next time.
Thanks. See you guys.